The arena floor was slick with something I desperately hoped was just lubricant fluid. 23,000 beings packed the Crimson Spiral Stadium, their collective roar shaking the reinforced walls like thunder inside a tin can. I adjusted my translator implant and tried not to think about the fact that I'd bet my entire monthly stipend on this fight. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted biological configurations. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, each word dripping with theatrical enthusiasm. Tonight, we have a special treat that will either be spectacular or spectacularly stupid. I leaned forward in my seat, my 3 eyes fixed on the holding cells below. My friend Torvik nudged me with one of his 6 arms, nearly spilling my overpriced nutrient slush. "You really put 500 credits on the human?" he asked, his vocal sacs inflating with what I recognized as concern. "Vex, I say this because I care about you. You're an idiot." "Wait," I said, holding up one claw. "Just wait." The first gate opened with a hydraulic hiss that cut through the noise like a blade. Out stepped Kragoth the Undefeated. And yeah, the name was earned. 3 meters of pure muscle wrapped in scales that could deflect plasma bolts. He'd been champion for 2 standard cycles, and his record was cleaner than a medical bay after sterilization. 47 wins, 0 losses. 3 opponents who decided retirement was preferable to facing him again. The crowd went absolutely berserk. Kragoth raised all 4 arms and bellowed, a sound that made my antennae vibrate uncomfortably. He was good at this, I'd give him that. The theatrics, the showmanship. He turned in a slow circle, making sure everyone got a good look at the championship belt strapped across his massive torso. And his opponent. The announcer paused for effect, and I could practically feel the anticipation crackling through the air. From the newly contacted Deathworld, designated Earth 347, standing at a measly 1.8 meters, weighing in at barely 82 kilograms. Give it up for Marcus Flynn. The second gate opened. Silence. Actual, complete silence in a stadium holding 23,000 beings. You could have heard a scale drop. The human walked out, and I understood immediately why Kragoth had demanded this fight. This wasn't a warrior. This was... well, he looked like someone who'd gotten lost on the way to an accounting office. Marcus Flynn stood there in simple combat attire, not even proper armor. No weapons, no enhancements visible to the naked eye. He had that bizarre skin tone humans possessed, somewhere between tan and pink, and hair the color of dried grass on a low-gravity moon. He was, by any reasonable standard, completely and utterly unremarkable. Torvik made a sound like air escaping from a deflating balloon. "Oh no. Vex, what have you done?" "He's human," I whispered, more to myself than to Torvik. "So what? Humans die just like everyone else." "Actually, scratch that. They die easier. They're made of soft tissue and bone. Bone, Vex. That calcium-based garbage that breaks if you look at it wrong." Down in the arena, Kragoth had stopped his victory lap. He stared at Marcus with an expression that somehow combined amusement, disappointment, and something that might have been offense. "This is the opponent command assigns me?" Kragoth's voice carried even without amplification. "This soft-skinned weakling? I demanded a real fight. A challenge. Not this." Marcus didn't respond. He just stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, watching Kragoth with an expression that I couldn't quite read. Humans were difficult that way. Their faces did things that didn't always match what they were feeling. The announcer, probably sensing that the energy was dying faster than a supernova in reverse, jumped in. "As per Galactic Combat Federation rules, both fighters have 60 seconds to prepare. Kragoth, as champion, you may activate your enhancements." "Oh right. I'd almost forgotten about those." Kragoth slammed one fist into his chest, and suddenly his scales began to glow with a sickly green light. Neural boosters, if I remembered correctly. Increased reaction time by a factor of 3. His muscles bulged even larger as the performance enhancers kicked in, pumping his system full of combat stimulants that would let him fight for hours without fatigue. "Marcus Flynn," the announcer called out. "You may also activate any enhancements or retrieve weapons as per your species' combat traditions." The human tilted his head slightly, like he was considering something deeply philosophical. Then he spoke for the first time, his voice carrying that strange flat quality that humans had when they were being what they called deadpan. "I'm good. Thanks." Torvik grabbed my arm with 3 of his hands. "Vex, it's not too late. You can forfeit the bet. Take the loss. I'll even lend you credits for next month's housing." "No," I said, my eyes never leaving the human. "I did my research. I read the reports from the first contact teams. Humans are from a Class 12 Deathworld. So what? Kragoth is from a Class 9. That's still Class 12, Torvik. Do you understand what that means? The entire planet is trying to kill them, constantly. The weather, the animals, the plants, the bacteria. They have an entire category of microscopic organisms that they literally cannot see that are actively trying to end them every single day, and they just deal with it. They created medicine to fight invisible enemies. That's great for them and their weird invisible battles. But down there is 3 meters of enhanced muscle that has literally never lost. Torvik's vocal sacs were turning purple, which meant he was genuinely upset. The announcer's voice cut through our argument. "Fighters, take your positions." Kragoth cracked his neck, the sound echoing through the arena like small explosions. He dropped into a combat stance that I recognized from my time studying galactic combat sports. Low center of gravity, arms positioned for both offense and defense, weight distributed for explosive movement, textbook perfect. Marcus just stood there, hands still at his sides, weight on both feet, completely relaxed. "Is he even a fighter?" Torvik asked desperately. "Does he know what's about to happen?" 3. The announcer began the countdown. The crowd found its voice again, roaring in anticipation. 2. Kragoth's muscles tensed, coiling like springs ready to release. 1. I held my breath. Fight. What happened next took approximately 3.2 seconds. I know because I watched the replay at least 40 times afterward, and I still barely believe it. Kragoth launched forward with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something his size. The combat stimulants and neural boosters working exactly as advertised. He covered half the arena floor in a blur of motion, all 4 arms extending toward Marcus in a pattern that would have caught any opponent in an inescapable grip. Marcus moved. Not away, not backward. That's what anyone with sense would have done. Instead, he took 1 step forward and slightly to the left, a movement so small it seemed meaningless. Kragoth's first arm, moving fast enough to break bones on impact, passed through empty air exactly where Marcus's head had been a microsecond before. The second arm followed, then the third, each one missing by margins so thin they might as well have been theoretical. Then Marcus did something that made my brain hurt to watch. He jumped, not up like you'd expect. Humans have terrible vertical leap compared to most species. No, he jumped forward and down, dropping beneath Kragoth's 4th arm while simultaneously moving closer to the champion. For 1 frozen moment, Marcus was inside Kragoth's guard, under all 4 arms in a position that should have been suicide. Kragoth began to bring his arms back down, about to crush the human like an insect. Marcus's right hand moved in a blur, striking upward at an angle that seemed random. His palm connected with a point on Kragoth's jaw that I didn't even know existed. The champion's head snapped back. His eyes rolled up. His enhanced, stimulant-boosted, never-defeated body went completely limp. 3 meters of unconscious alien crashed to the arena floor with an impact that cracked the reinforced surface. Marcus stood over him, hand already back at his side, breathing steady. Silence. 3 seconds of absolute, complete reality-breaking silence. Then the arena exploded. Torvik was making a sound I'd never heard before, somewhere between a scream and a laugh and a religious experience. What? How? That's not. What? I was already on my feet, yelling incoherently along with thousands of others. The betting board on the far wall was flashing error messages, unable to process the upset. The medical team rushed out with a hover stretcher. Kragoth wasn't moving. They checked his vitals, confirmed he was just unconscious, and began loading him onto the stretcher with considerable effort. The announcer seemed to have lost the ability to form words. But, Marcus Flynn, winner. 3 seconds? Down in the arena, Marcus turned and started walking back toward his gate. Just walking, like he'd finished a light workout instead of ending a 2-cycle championship reign in the time it took most beings to process what they were seeing. Excuse me, human. Marcus. A reporter had somehow made it to the arena floor, microphone extended. That was incredible. How did you train for this fight? What martial art was that? What's your secret? Marcus stopped, turned, and gave the reporter a look that I would later learn humans called seriously. I'm a middle school vice principal, he said flatly. I break up fights between teenagers every day. Kragoth telegraphed his moves, had 0 ground game, and left his jaw completely unprotected. Also, he was muscle-bound to the point of limiting his own flexibility. It was like fighting a really angry refrigerator. But he's never lost. He's enhanced. He's never fought someone from Earth, Marcus interrupted. Look, I just came here because my niece wanted to visit the station and someone saw me sparring at the hotel gym and thought it would be funny to set this up. I didn't even want to fight. Your champion literally demanded it, said he wanted a real challenge. So I gave him one. The reporter's translator was struggling to process the level of casual dismissiveness in the human's tone. Are you saying you weren't even trying? Marcus considered this. I was trying not to hurt him permanently. Your medical team should check him for concussion, by the way. I pulled that strike pretty hard. But his skull is thinner than it looks. He turned and walked away, leaving the reporter standing there. Microphone still extended, brain probably melting. I looked at Torvik. Torvik looked at me. You knew, he said slowly. You actually knew this would happen. I pulled out my betting slip, watching the numbers climb on the payout board. I read the reports. Torvik. All of them. There was this one line that stuck with me. It said, humans do not have natural armor, venom, claws, or enhanced strength. They compensate by becoming really, really good at hitting things in exactly the right spot to make them stop moving. That's insane. That's Earth. The crowd was still going wild. Replays showing on every screen. Frame-by-frame breakdown of the dodge, the positioning, the strike. Combat analysts were already appearing on the broadcast feeds, looking shell-shocked as they tried to explain what had just happened. One of them, a 4-armed Velcran with 17 championship titles to his name, looked directly into the camera. I've been teaching combat for 40 standard cycles, he said slowly. And I just watched someone break every rule we teach about arena fighting. He moved toward the attack instead of away. He gave up the range advantage. He positioned himself in what should have been a kill zone. And it worked because he knew exactly what he was doing. His co-commentator finished. That wasn't LUT. That wasn't even skill, not in the traditional sense. That was knowledge. Application. Precision. That, the Velcran said quietly, was a human being who deals with danger every single day and has learned exactly how much force, applied exactly where, ends a threat immediately. I collected my winnings 3 hours later. 500 credits had become 15,000. Torvik was still muttering to himself about refrigerators and jaw strikes. As we left the stadium, I pulled up the Galactic Combat Federation's updated rankings on my datapad. Marcus Flynn had been automatically bumped to rank 1 based on his victory. His status was listed as retired. Apparently, he'd filed the paperwork immediately after the fight. He had a vacation to finish, and teenagers to supervise back home. Somewhere in the station, a middle school vice principal from Earth was probably helping his niece pick out souvenirs, completely unbothered by the fact that he'd just broken every combat record in the sector. And tomorrow, he'd go back to breaking up fights between children who didn't know how lucky they were that their vice principal pulled his strikes. The thing about becoming accidentally famous across 17 sectors is that people don't really care about your vacation plans. I learned this exactly 4 hours after Marcus Flynn's fight, when my communication pad started exploding with messages. Job offers, interview requests. 3 marriage proposals from species I'd never even heard of. And 1 very official-looking summons from the Galactic Combat Federation headquarters. You're going, Torvik said, shoving another handful of crystallized nutrients into his mouth. We were sitting in my apartment, watching the news feeds that had apparently decided to cover nothing but the fight for the foreseeable future. I didn't do anything, I protested. I just bet on a fight. You bet 15,000 credits worth on a fight. The betting commission wants to know how you knew. They think you had inside information. Read publicly available reports. Reports that apparently nobody else bothered to read. Torvik pointed at the screen where a panel of experts were still arguing about the biomechanics of Marcus's strike. Look at them. They've been doing this for 6 hours. They brought in a medical specialist who spent 40 minutes explaining human nervous systems and something called a vagus nerve that I still don't understand. On screen, the specialist, a Trelvan doctor with skin like polished stone, was gesturing animatedly at a holographic model of human anatomy. You see here, the strike wasn't about force, it was about location and angle. Humans have mapped every vulnerable point on their own bodies, because their planet kept finding new ways to exploit those weaknesses. They turned that defensive knowledge into offensive capability. Another expert, this one a former champion looking distinctly uncomfortable, interrupted. Are you telling me that every human knows how to do this? Not to this level of precision, no. But basic strike point knowledge. That's taught to their children. They have an entire industry devoted to teaching younglings how to disable opponents efficiently. I muted the feed. This is getting out of hand. My pad chimed again. This time it was a message from an address I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully, half expecting another marriage proposal. Instead, it was from Marcus Flynn. Hey, heard you won big on the fight. Good for you. Doing research before gambling is smart. Most of the folks here. Anyway, my niece thinks it's hilarious that I accidentally became famous, and she wants to meet the person who actually bet on me. We're at the Orbital Gardens, level 42 if you want to stop by. Fair warning, she's going to ask you a lot of questions. She's 12 and has recently discovered the concept of investigative journalism. Mark Torvik read over my shoulder with two of his eyes. You're going to go, aren't you? Obviously. Can I come? Obviously. The Orbital Gardens were beautiful in that artificial way that station landscaping always managed. All perfectly maintained plants from 40 different worlds arranged in aesthetically pleasing patterns that would never occur in nature. We found Marcus sitting on a bench near a fountain that cycled through 7 different liquid types on a programmed rotation. Next to him was a small human female with the same grass-colored hair, wearing what I would later learn was called a hoodie with some kind of cartoon character on it. "You're Vex," she announced before we even got close. "Uncle Marcus said you were smart." "I thank you," I managed. Marcus stood up, extending his hand in that strange human greeting gesture. I'd learned enough to know I was supposed to grip it briefly and move my arm up and down. It still felt weird. "Thanks for coming," he said. "This is my niece, Amy." "Amy. This is Vex," and he looked at Torvik. "Torvik," my friend supplied, also attempting the handshake with 3 arms simultaneously. It got awkward fast. Amy laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a pleasant breeze. "That's so cool. How many arms do your species usually have?" 6, Torvik said, clearly charmed despite himself. "How many do humans have?" "Just 2. We're pretty basic." She pulled out a datapad that looked well used. "I'm writing an article for my school paper about Uncle Marcus's fight. Can I interview you about why you bet on him?" I sat down on the bench, Torvik settling beside me. "Well, I did research on humans and Deathworlds, but lots of people had access to that information, right?" Amy's eyes, which were an improbable shade of blue, focused on me with unnerving intensity. "So why did you actually believe it when nobody else did?" That was a better question than most journalists had asked. "I suppose, because I wanted it to be true," I admitted. Every fight I've ever watched followed the same pattern. Biggest wins. Strongest wins. Most enhanced wins. It gets boring. The idea that someone could win through precision instead of power? That was interesting. Marcus made a sound that might have been approval. That's the trap most fighters fall into. They think combat is about who hits harder. It's not. It's about who understands leverage, timing, and anatomy. Is that what you teach the teenagers? Torvik asked. No, I teach teenagers that violence is a last resort and that using words is almost always better. Marcus smiled slightly. But when words fail and someone decides to throw a punch in the cafeteria, yeah, I know how to end it quickly and safely. For everyone involved. You've fought a lot of teenagers. Amy rolled her eyes. Uncle Marcus breaks up like 3 fights a week at school. It's a rough district, he said mildly. A group of beings had gathered at a respectful distance, watching us, or more specifically, watching Marcus. One of them, a Keltharian with bioluminescent patches that were flashing nervously, seemed to be building up courage. Finally, she approached. Excuse me, Mr. Flynn. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to ask. Are all humans like you? Marcus considered this seriously. Like me, how? Combat capable. Dangerous. She hesitated. Scary. Oh, definitely not, he said cheerfully. I'm not even particularly good at fighting by human standards. I'm a school administrator. You want scary humans? You should meet actual fighters. MMA athletes, special forces operators, professional bodyguards, people who train every day specifically to be better at combat. The Keltharian's patches flashed a color I didn't recognize. You're not. You're saying you're average, below average for combat specialists, yeah. A small crowd had formed now. I recognized several faces from the arena. How did you learn to fight? Someone called out. Took some martial arts classes as a kid. Judo, mostly. Some boxing in college. Learned restraint techniques when I became a teacher because we're legally required to know how to safely intervene in student altercations. He shrugged. Nothing special. Nothing special, Torvik repeated faintly. He says nothing special. Amy was recording everything on her pad, her expression delighted. This is going to be the best article ever. Another voice from the crowd. Would you consider training fighters? I'll pay whatever you want. Marcus shook his head. I'm a vice principal. I have a job and a life back on Earth. This whole thing was just a weird detour because someone saw me working out and got ideas. But you're the champion now, the person protested. I filed retirement paperwork immediately. The title goes to whoever wants it. He paused. Probably not Kragoth, though. His pride took more damage than his jaw. Is he okay? I asked, suddenly realizing I hadn't checked. Concussion, bruised ego, and a very serious conversation with his training team about fundamental defensive gaps, Marcus said. He'll be fine. Physically, anyway. Mentally, he's discovering that being undefeated makes you overconfident. Amy tugged on her uncle's sleeve. Can we go to the observation deck before dinner? I want to see the nebula. Sure. Marcus stood up, and the crowd instinctively took a step back. He noticed and sighed. I'm not going to attack anyone. I only fight when challenged in official capacity or when breaking up teenagers. You're all safe. Can I ask one more question? The Keltharian said quietly. Go ahead. Why did you accept the challenge? You said you didn't want to fight. Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking down at his niece. Amy's been studying Earth history in school. Humans, specifically, and she learned about all the times humans were underestimated, dismissed as weak or primitive or not worth respect. It bothered her. Amy nodded vigorously. People used to think Earth wasn't important because we didn't have natural weapons or armor. So when Kragoth demanded a real fight and specifically asked for a human opponent because he thought it would be easy and funny, Marcus's expression hardened slightly. I figured someone should teach him that underestimating humans is a mistake. Plus, Amy wanted to see the station and they offered to comp our entire vacation if I participate. Free hotel, Amy added helpfully. And tickets to the museum. The crowd was processing this. The greatest upset in Galactic Combat Federation history had happened because of a teaching moment and free vacation perks. Torvik started laughing, that wheezing sound he made when something struck him as cosmically absurd. You didn't even care about the fight. Not particularly, Marcus admitted. Though I did feel bad about the knockout. I was aiming to just stun him, but human strength is calibrated for Earth gravity. I forgot to fully adjust for the difference. Hit him harder than intended. You pulled your strike and still knocked out an enhanced champion, I said slowly. Yeah, that was embarrassing. I should have calculated better. A new voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Embarrassing for you or for him? We all turned. A tall figure in official Galactic Combat Federation robes was approaching, flanked by two security officers. His scales were deep purple, marking him as a Drazen, and the medals on his chest indicated serious rank. Mr. Flynn, he said formally. I am Coordinator Vex Rin of the GC Ethics and Regulations Committee. Unfortunate name coincidence, I muttered. Torvik elbowed me. Marcus met the coordinator's gaze steadily. What can I do for you? We need to discuss your fight. Specifically, whether it violated any regulations regarding undisclosed capabilities or enhancement. I didn't use any enhancements. No drugs, no implants, no external tech, just biomechanics and anatomy knowledge. Exactly, Vex Rin said. That's the problem. We don't have a regulation category for species standard knowledge application. Every other fighter declares their training, their techniques, their strategic approach. You declared nothing. Because I'm not a fighter, I'm an educator who got challenged and accepted. An educator who ended a championship reign in 3 seconds. 3.2 seconds, Amy corrected, showing her pad. I timed it frame by frame. The coordinator looked at her, then back at Marcus. The GCF board has been in emergency session since your fight. We need to establish whether humans should be classified as an enhanced species by default. That caused a stir in the crowd. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Enhanced? We're not enhanced. We're just adapted to a really hostile planet, a Class 12 Deathworld. We're aware. Vex Rin pulled up a holographic display. After your fight, we reviewed the initial contact reports more carefully. Humans have redundant organ systems, can survive injuries that would kill most species, possess endurance capabilities far beyond galactic average, and apparently have intrinsic knowledge of biomechanical vulnerabilities. We also get sick from our own food if we don't cook it properly, Marcus countered. And we die if we don't consume water every few days. We're not superhuman. We're just specialized for survival. That specialization allowed you to defeat our champion effortlessly. It wasn't effortless. I had to identify his attack pattern, calculate the optimal counterposition, execute a precision strike at the correct angle and force, and do all of that while compensating for gravity differences and his enhancement speed. Marcus crossed his arms. Just because I made it look easy doesn't mean it was. Vex Rin studied him for a long moment. You understand, this has created a political situation. Multiple species are now demanding humans be restricted from combat sports. Others want humans recruited as trainers. Some want Earth quarantined as too dangerous for contact. That's stupid, Amy said bluntly. Uncle Marcus isn't dangerous. He helps kids learn algebra and make sure they don't skip class. He's literally the least dangerous person I know. Your uncle just knocked out an enhanced champion with one strike, the coordinator pointed out. Because the champion was being a jerk and didn't protect his jaw. Amy's voice rose. It's not Uncle Marcus's fault your champion didn't know basic defensive positioning. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. Easy, kiddo. She took a breath, but continued, more calmly. Humans aren't enhanced. We're educated. There's a difference. Every human kid learns about the human body in school. We know where the bones are, where the nerves are, what happens if you hit someone wrong. We learn it so we don't accidentally hurt each other seriously. Uncle Marcus just applied basic knowledge that any human has. The coordinator looked genuinely troubled by this. Every human knows how to disable opponents. Every human knows human anatomy, Marcus corrected. What they do with that knowledge varies. Most use it for medicine, sports science, or just understanding their own bodies. Some, like teachers in rough schools, learn specific applications for safely stopping violence. Actual combat specialists take it way further. How much further? I could give you names of human martial artists who would make my performance look like a child's play fight. People who have spent their entire lives studying combat. But they're not enhanced either. They're just really dedicated to their craft. Vex Rin was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, the board wants to invite you to a demonstration. A controlled environment, where we can properly assess human capabilities and establish appropriate classifications. No, Marcus said simply. No, I'm on vacation with my niece. We're going to see the nebula, visit the Quantum Museum, try that zero-gravity restaurant on level 60, and then we're going home. I'm not interested in being a test subject or a political talking point. Mr. Flynn, this is a matter of galactic importance. Then, the galaxy should have done better research before assuming humans were weak. Marcus's voice was polite but firm. The information was available. Vex found it and won 15,000 credits because they bothered to look. That's not my problem or my responsibility to solve. Amy was grinning up at her uncle with undisguised admiration. The coordinator seemed to be struggling with something. You're refusing a formal request from the GCF? I'm declining an invitation, yeah. If you want to classify humans as enhanced based on one fight, that's your choice. But I'm not participating in any demonstrations or assessments. I have 9 days left of vacation, a niece who wants to see everything this station offers, and a stack of disciplinary reports waiting for me when I get back to Earth. You're just going to leave? After everything? That was always the plan. Marcus checked his chronometer. The nebula viewing window closes in 40 minutes. We should go. He started walking, Amy skipping beside him. The crowd parted automatically. I found myself standing up. Marcus, wait. He turned back. What you did today, it's going to change things. People are going to look at humans differently now. Maybe, he said. Or maybe they'll just remember that underestimating anyone based on appearance is a bad idea. Either way, that's their choice to make. Is that what you teach your students? He smiled, genuinely this time. I teach them that everyone has strengths and everyone has vulnerabilities. The key is understanding both in yourself and respecting both in others. Also, proper comma usage, but that's less relevant here. They left, heading toward the observation deck. The crowd slowly dispersed, already pulling up communication pads to spread the news of Marcus's refusal to cooperate with the GCF. Torvik looked at me. He just walked away from what could have been fame and fortune. He already has what he values, I said. A job he cares about and a niece he loves. The rest is just noise. That's very human of him. Yeah, I agreed. It really is. The next morning, I woke up to find that Marcus Flynn had become even more famous overnight. His refusal to participate in testing, combined with Amy's article that she'd apparently written and posted to 17 different school networks, had sparked a massive debate across the galactic net. The dominant opinion seemed to be respect mixed with healthy fear. Humans weren't enhanced. They were just competent. Dangerously competent, the kind of species that survived a Class 12 Deathworld not through physical superiority, but through intelligence, adaptability, and a truly frightening willingness to learn from everything that tried to kill them. The GCF released a statement classifying humans as standard biological with specialized environmental adaptations, not enhanced, not restricted, just human. Kragoth gave an interview from his hospital bed, where he admitted he'd been overconfident and had underestimated his opponent. He also announced he was retiring from fighting to pursue coaching, specifically wanting to study human combat techniques. I spent 2 years undefeated because I was bigger and stronger than everyone, he said, looking humbled in a way I'd never seen. Flynn beat me in 3 seconds because he was smarter and more precise. That's the lesson. Power without knowledge is just waiting to lose. I never saw Marcus again after that day in the gardens. He and Amy finished their vacation, saw the nebula, visited every museum on the station, and went home to Earth. But 6 months later, I received a message. It was a photo of Amy holding up a printed newspaper. The headline read, "Local Vice Principal accidentally becomes Galactic Champion, refuses to make it weird." The article had won her school's journalism competition. Below the photo was a message. "Thanks for the interview. Amy says you're welcome to visit Earth anytime, but be warned, the gravity is intense, the wildlife is aggressive, and middle school students are terrifying. Also, she wants to know if you're interested in a follow-up article about responsible gambling." Marcus. I showed it to Torvik, who had finally stopped muttering about refrigerators and jaw strikes. "Are you going to visit?" he asked. I looked at the photo again. Amy grinning with pride. Marcus smiling in the background, probably grading papers. Maybe, I said. After I do some research first. Smart, Torvik agreed. Always do your research. I kept that photo. Sometimes, when I'm watching arena fights and they all blend together in a predictable mess of power versus power, I pull it up and remember that somewhere out there on a Class 12 Deathworld, a vice principal breaks up teenage fights with more skill than galactic champions possess. Remember that humans aren't enhanced or superhuman or particularly special by their own standards. They're just survivors who learn to be very, very good at what survival required. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's the most dangerous thing in the galaxy.